Are you sure she doesn't know I'm here?
No, she doesn't. I'm sorry.
I don't know why I even bother coming here.
Do you believe in God?
No, why?
If you did, it might give you some comfort.
How exactly?
You would at least believe that her soul is eternal and out there somewhere.
I want her here with me while I'm with her, and I want her to respond to me, goddammit.
I'm sorry. I'll leave you alone.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
It is not of my business, but he might be wrong, you know.
What?
I mean, there's a chance she's still there.
Right.
Not the person you knew, but an aspect of her sense of self. Some neuroscientists and philosophers argue that we have a core sense of self, a basic understanding of the outside world. So in a sense, she is here with you.
That all sounds interesting, but I actually want to talk to her.
She can't speak to you in words, but she is in a way responding to her environment, which you are a part of. You are in her world, and you can try to listen to what she is trying to say back to you.
You mean she can feel my presence?
Yes, and she responds to it in some sense.
I'll look into that.
I believe that existentially we all die and are reborn when we understand each other and the world differently. So if you yourself can go through that experience, she can pick up your energy, and it will revive her in some sense.
That's beautiful. What are you here for?
Kidney stone removal.
Oh wow, that's painful.
Yes, well, what can you do about it? Physical pain is a part of life. Your pain is much worse than mine, though. It is more significant.
You know you just gave this poor man false hope, right?
How so?
His wife is nowhere to be found there.
You can't be sure of that.
Oh, I'm certain, all right. She's basically nothing inside. She's now a lump of flesh and bones.
Shh. She might hear you. How can you be so sure of yourself?
Because everything is physical, which means the only way she could have consciousness is because of her brain. Your thoughts, feelings, and sounds you make, everything can be traced back to brain activity.
Everything is physical? That's extreme. So my consciousness is not real then? It's nothing but a lie?
In a sense, yes.
I see. You want the physical world you study to have the last word on everything in order to gain more power and resources. You are aware that anyone who reduces everything to one fundamental layer of reality is a fascist, right? I truly believe that the new fascists will be evil tech moguls who believe that by messing with everyone's brain with the use of new technology, they can control the world.
Huh, enough with these bombastic statements. Let's get back to the facts.
You just proved my point. You want to shut me up in order to subsume me under the content of objective reality.
Okay. All I'm saying is that your brain causes everything you experience.
Yes, instead of giving an explanation of consciousness in terms of brain activity, you are eliminating it by saying that it is identical to my brain. Well, I am not my brain, I can tell you that. I wish I was. Then maybe I wouldn't be such a screw-up, but instead a perfect machine. Nothing is stable and objective in the sense of mind-independent reality, because it is affected and colored by a perspective. Everything you observe in my brain is of human interest, a product of human awareness, a way to understand reality.
No, that's not true. The world is only physical, and we know it from evidence. Moreover, how can you explain the fact that there are things and events outside of you that will still be there even when you aren't looking, or events that are happening right now that are happening without you?
The world is only physical? That is a naive way of understanding reality.
You think my explanations are naive? You just live in a fantasy. So far, I've had to listen to your unscientific explanations which don't make sense to me. So please, give me some respect.
Relax. All I am saying is that consciousness is not directed towards physical objects that are outside the boundaries of my body. Instead, they are directed towards the meaning of whatever I face in thought, imagination, dream, fantasy, and the actual world. Moreover, your consciousness is part of the human consciousness. So just because you are not experiencing physically something directly, doesn't mean that it is in a mind-independent reality. Someone else is experiencing them, and therefore it is in the human consciousness. And things that happened in the past remain within our consciousness. We are still aware of them. This is why we are constantly rediscovering the past.
And what about the things you're not aware of? Where are they, if not in an objective reality that doesn't change?
Well, just because I wasn't aware of them doesn't mean that they were in a different reality. Humans discovered new galaxies, forces in nature, and events that happened in the past. But that doesn't mean that at some point these were in another realm.
What I'm saying is that you cannot have knowledge of anything outside of perception. But this is not the same as saying that things exist outside my perception. I don't think you can have knowledge of the things themselves, but I can infer that whenever I don't perceive an object, it exists independent of me.
You want to say that things are there no matter who observes them. But this is just a construction of reality as independent of you. You know that they are there when you are not perceiving them only because you already perceived them in the past. The first time you faced them, you took them as mind-dependent. And then when you looked away, they became mind-independent. How convenient. And what about your awareness of existence as a whole? How do you know what existence is? Your awareness of being, or spirit, the whole of existence. The fact that something exists at all precedes your awareness of this or that particular thing. And this thematization of the whole of existence is due to the fact that you are born into awareness of others in a community. The wonder of being propels all knowledge. Without your awareness of being, you wouldn't have been able to objectify the brain or the world. That is, to determine what exists. You, my friend, want to separate between the mind and the brain, awareness and reality as it is. But you can't. To be is to already have awareness.
Okay, reality is not independent of human awareness. But nevertheless, human awareness has a structure that can be interpreted as inside and outside. The fact is that we can have a body with a boundary and senses that allow us to navigate through the world, and when these are blocked, they stop us from seeing things. Illusions prove how our senses can be tricked by information in the environment. And scientific discoveries show that there are things we cannot experience but nevertheless still exist. Therefore, we can infer that things exist outside of ourselves. Moreover, you can't perceive what other people are thinking based on their behavior, but you can assume that these people have a set of similar experiences to you.
Yes, fine. Again, things exist independent of me, but not independent of human consciousness. Moreover, if our senses are damaged, the world doesn't stop making sense to us. We also have the capability to sense our body moving in space without looking at it, which means that our awareness of ourselves and the outside world is much more primordial than you think. You can't tear human beings away from the outside world.
But there are regularities in the outside world, and the brain is the reason why we see them. The same objects that you've seen before keep appearing in the same way, because they are in the cognitive maps of the brain. You can have subjective individuality and interact with or interpret things in different ways, but nonetheless, these regularities exist in the brain.
So if things don't change in the brain, then what does that prove? That they exist without me? I still have cognitive maps of them because I am aware of them.
My existence is independent of other people and things outside of myself. I don't want to resort to relativism and solipsism. I believe in an objective world that we can all agree on.
I'm telling you that your awareness is dependent on other people. I am eliminating the problem of other minds the same way as Hegel did. Objectivity is constituted by our shared lives with others in a linguistic community that is an implicit normative force. I don't have to wonder whether people are perceiving something different than me because I live in a community.
But objectivity is a concept of something existing independently of my mental state.
Exactly. And I am trying to tell you that your brain and the physical world are dependent on your awareness, and as such, it cannot be objective by itself. You, my friend, want to separate the brain and the physical world from your knowledge of them, and you can't.
All I know is that everything in the mind is dependent on our brain and physics. Any causal powers in the mind are reducible to the brain. The dynamics of the mind are explained by the dynamics of the brain. We can say subjective or cognitive constructs exist in some sense, but in principle, they are all manifested in an objective reality that is built upon things more fundamental. Consciousness doesn't have an existence independent of other more fundamental things.
No. For you, subjective and cognitive constructs don't exist at all. They are copies, imitations, lies of the real things. You are a Platonist in denial, rather than a proud Aristotelian. For you, I am constantly in a cave looking at all the lies of existence that my brain projects on the wall. You are silencing the first-person perspective and argue that it is a byproduct of a fundamental reality you can get access to with your senses. Even Plato was more cautious than you. Many scientists have already accepted the fact that consciousness emerges out of brain activity, that it can't be reduced to it. This means that as a whole, it can't be explained in terms of physics. The top-down approach you are adopting is very controversial. Different physical and mental processes happen at the same time, rather than one process with one origin. To be a human living organism is to have a body and a consciousness in a certain environment.
Again, I'm sorry to tell you, but consciousness is a product of your brain. And the brain itself is a product of neurons, molecules, atoms, subatomic particles, etc.
But I'm trying to tell you that consciousness is not sitting on your brain, the physical objective world, but is oriented towards understanding the meaning of whatever you face. It is projected outward rather than in a container you call the brain. The brain can't determine my consciousness because my consciousness is not in the brain. Your whole being along with your brain is oriented towards things in the world. You see a causal relationship of what is happening in the brain versus my subjective experience. That's fine, but that doesn't mean that it is at the top part of the pyramid of existence.
But I want to study the objective world, and when I look around, I can see that things don't change. The sun stays the same, independent of my existence, and will still be there after I die.
So what? It is still in your consciousness. You can think about the sun, paint it on a canvas from your imagination, dream about it, talk about it, and so on. And again, just because I don't perceive them directly doesn't mean other human beings don't. And if I die, it doesn't mean that human consciousness will die with me. Human consciousness is one long story after all. That's why we care about a past and a future that we will never be able to physically be in.
Yes, that's the point. Human beings weren't here all along. The world can go on without them.
Well, if you believe in strong determinism, then human beings' existence is caused by the Big Bang, which means that people were determined to come into being rather than pop out of nowhere. But this is a stretch. It is more accurate to say that because your parents had intercourse or chose to have a child together, you are here today. It is not because of the Big Bang. A more convincing argument for the embeddedness of human beings in the universe will be one that understands it as a process rather than a container. This means that everything is evolving. That is, that human beings didn't come late to the party, so to speak. There was a reality without human beings, but it was always implicitly human. Besides, some physicists today seem to be saying that the universe is cyclical and creative, which means that reality as a whole is dying and free, constantly beginning a new phase like an artist's body of work, rather than stable and ordered. This means that God did not create a perfect world as mechanical physics understands it. And it also means that scientists became, in some sense, art historians. Personally, I think it is also a human projection of reality. I don't think being can be exhausted by human beings. But what do I know, right? I'm not as smart as a scientist.
Okay, so I'm not talking about reality without us in it, but an objective one. We exist in the same reality as other physical objects. But there are things that don't change in this reality, and as such I can infer that it is objective. And the same is true about the brain, which is deterministic.
But again, how do you know all these things that you claim don't change are not seen from your own human perspective? Also, what does objectivity even mean, if it is not mind-independent, that is, outside of human thought? When you generalize about reality as you do, you are still using your mind to do so, so it is not mind-independent reality.
I see your point, but I can infer that if those things exist when I don't see them, that they are mind-independent. I maintain that objectivity is whatever exists independent of me, and I know this because there are things that don't change. And how do I know they don't change? I can infer.
But what you fail to see is that everything exists for you because you have a consciousness. So they cannot be outside of your consciousness, floating out there in a different reality. There is no in here and out there. You are embodied and embedded in the world, not a spectator of the world from the outside. You don't look at the world as you look at a picture in a museum. Moreover, I ask you, if the brain is deterministic, does it mean that it is independent not only from consciousness, but also from the outside physical world? If so, is it untouchable and hence more superior than anything in the physical world? It says a lot about your position. Descartes wrongly thought that all physical reality is deterministic, since he took it to be exclusively mechanical. This was the source of his anxiety, since it meant that God abandoned nature, and that man is not free. Descartes' entire philosophy is a quest for freedom. But you, on the other hand, are not preoccupied with the fact that your brain supposedly determines your thoughts and actions. You are not anxious as to whether you are even telling the truth or whether you can be responsible for your actions. This in effect makes you, and whoever listens to you, an easy target for sadistic and corrupt people, be it tyrants or cult leaders.
Okay, I changed my mind. Forget the world being mind independent. We perceive everything through the mind. We gain knowledge through the mind, and events happen outside our perception.
Okay, that's reasonable. But my position is trying to dissolve the dichotomy between internalism and externalism. There's no outside world over there, and then an inside world over here, but constant projection towards the meaning of beings. And what affords it is being or time, that is, the gaps in my experience of the world, which is essentially the meaning of having awareness. So our subjectivity doesn't sit on anything objective. The physical world doesn't have authority over us. We constantly discover the meaning of things in the world, which is the reason why our experience is that of displacement.
But then how can you explain that the world carries on without you being aware of it?
If something that is in the periphery of my awareness still exists for me, I have a relationship to it. It is not independent of my awareness of it. As a scientist, you just have to accept, like many philosophers of science, that there is no neutral evidence. The role of science is to understand reality better, rather than knowing mind-independent reality, or whether things cause us to see them as they are, or we are just projecting our beliefs onto them. There is no subjective or objective world, but an interaction between us and the world. And this is what we call reality. Since you are an empiricist, you think that things cause you to perceive the world the way you do, that you are passive, but you are not. You are always learning about the world and projecting your being towards the world. You are in a constant dialogue, an exchange with the world, causing and being caused in the same way that water dissolves ice. But at the same time, the ice is cooling the water. You can't know what came first, you or the world, since both of you are happening simultaneously. Both the water and ice had powers to manifest something in the world, and at that moment they both did. You can't be taken as an individual object because you are never alone. Like ice and water, you are dependent on the world. You see the world in terms of measurable time and space in which people exist, and can only know things because they experience them directly. But I am trying to tell you that things we don't directly experience still exist for us. According to you, human beings can only be located and identified in one time and place. They are objects for you, but they can't be because they are aware of their being. And for that reason, things have meanings for them. If you treat human beings as objects, consciousness then becomes a means to an end, that is, a tool to know the so-called objective reality. But consciousness is the way in which we can understand ourselves and the world as a whole. And this has power over the way we see and understand reality. You are constantly trying to close gaps in time while curating your being in space, rather than seeing the outside world moving in time and space.
Well, the woman lying next to you is definitely not.
Maybe not physically, but existentially she is. If she still has a core sense of self, she is constantly displacing her being as we speak.
How can you know that? She can't tell you because she can't speak.
Well, language is not only physical or formal. We can speak to each other in silence. This kind of communication can't be studied empirically or mathematized formally, but needs to be lived through in order to be understood. Artists constantly try to express something to their audience using this indirect language. Sounds, gestures, facial expressions, and body language are not physically neutral behaviors, but are already expressive, and the prerequisite for conceptual language along with moods and shared implicit understandings in a specific community. Without existence, objects can't be pointed out, objectified, and known in both ordinary and formal language. This is why in this lady's silence, she tells me more than I can actually understand at any moment. In her stillness and calmness, she denotes existence as a whole for me. And as such, she gives me anxiety rather than peace of mind. You want to define my identity in terms of physical space and measurable time, and I'm trying to tell you that the limit of my existence is not in terms of these abstractions, but in terms of the nothing, the untruth. And this nothingness can penetrate into my existence when I'm explicitly questioning my being.
She can't question her being.
True. She doesn't have a profound sense of self, but a very basic one.
You know what? You're just trying to distract me with your rhetoric. It doesn't matter what the meaning of causation, language, being, and human existence are. All I know is that there are invariances in the outside world. I don't know why you can't understand what I'm saying. It is rather simple. The regularity of my experience suggests that it is the simplest explanation, and the history of science has tried to explain these regularities. At the fundamental level, that is physics. I don't think you can know reality outside the context of being human, with a human mind. Nevertheless, it doesn't stop us from making inferences about things being objective. Something can be viewed from the lens of a mind, but its invariance across different viewpoints, situations, and times makes it obviously objective.
Inferences about things being objective? That can't satisfy the strong claims you are trying to make. Generalization about mind-independent reality won't cut it. And the problem for me is not that your view is complicated, but that it is too simple and that you refuse to do philosophy in order to cut straight to scientific evidence. The fact that you are searching for simple answers just shows that you are not as neutral as you think you are. Your aim seems to be to weaken my position and find ways to improve yours. I, on the other hand, value your point of view on reality. It is one way to see it, a theoretical way, but it is not an authentic way. Do you get my drift?
No, I don't. I just want to present you with the evidence. Let's get back to the brain. You can't, under any circumstance, deny that there is a causal relationship between the brain and subjective experience.
If you change how I feel by poking into my brain, I will still have self-awareness. I'm not going to lose my consciousness completely. The meaning of consciousness is not merely having subjective experiences. For example, what it's like for me to feel and think, but to have a holistic sense of being in the world, a pre-reflective understanding of the world. The lady next to us is constantly having a dialogue with the outside world, which means she can't silence it and have a dialogue with herself. If you perform surgery on my brain and change my personality, I'm still free in some sense. The brain doesn't order my experience all the way down. Besides, my brain is not independent. The experiences that victims of trauma go through can change their brains, but if they address the trauma with the help of others, they can recover the brain. Some believe that the brain's plasticity proves that there is an exchange between the mental and the physical realms. Moreover, experiments show that we can stop ourselves from taking an action, and as a result, change our brain activity. Modern philosophy is predicated on the idea that by doubting, by saying no, we can be free. This, of course, also has political implications. By owning our actions and thoughts, we transcend nature or whatever supposedly has authority over us.
Yes, but if these things are true, they all manifest physically. Physical rehabilitation can help a patient with brain injury who has become paralyzed because of the physical interactions taking place in your brain. This we understand well. You choose to act in certain ways that enable those physical interactions, just like a bodybuilder choosing to eat a certain way and lift weights in order to build his muscles physically.
I was talking about victims of mental trauma. You immediately thought I was referring to physical trauma. Interesting. Does the brain repair itself, or command me to overcome my trauma? No, my choices and my relationship with others do. And I didn't make these choices because of my brain, but because my being is significant to me. I care for it.
Yes, but your choices are obviously a product of brain activity. Brain activity is causing your muscles to contract and relax, which changes the physical world. Input from the physical world is fed into the brain and changes how the brain functions.
But my choices motivate certain changes in the brain, not the other way around.
It doesn't prove anything. You can injure the brain in a way that your awareness will still be intact, or you can bash it in, destroying your awareness. Your awareness is always dependent on your brain, and all your doubts and choices are products of physical processes in the brain.
It's true that we are existentially, physically, and mentally vulnerable beings. Depressed people, after all, often can't make their own choices, function physically, or see the world clearly. But for you, that doesn't matter, because you are certain that without my brain, I am nothing. But how can you be so sure? Are you saying that the only way I can find out if my core sense of self can die is to allow someone else to bash my brain in? Oh man. If the only way to prove mind-independent reality and the complete authority of the brain over the mind is to destroy all the brains in the world, then our brain does have authority over us. It controls our actions and thoughts. It is our God. And like any God, it demands from us to make sacrifices in order to show our faith in its complete authority and sole existence. You know what? This conversation is beginning to scare me. I have surgery tomorrow. You fanatically love your evidence and neutrality. I'm going to take my subjective point of view and direct it towards the nice quiet lady in a coma next to my bed. It is much better than talking about objectivity with you. I will remember to blame my stupid brain if I feel too much pain. And if I can't take the pain, I will tell the doctors to just kill my brain so I won't feel anything. Yes, that's what I will do. I will kill my God.
What? You're gonna kill what?
Oh, no. Don't worry. Everything is fine. This is just a silly talk between friends.
Doctor!